The morning sun had barely climbed above the pale blue horizon when Ralen crest. His entire world seemed to collapse beneath the weight of another impossible day. His hands trembled as he reread the letter he'd found tucked under his door, the final notice, stamped in bold red warning, that if he missed his upcoming custody review hearing, his 5-year-old daughter Mara might be placed in temporary care. Ralen folded the paper with slow, aching fingers, feeling as though the universe had singled him out again for another blow. He glanced toward the small mattress where Mara slept peacefully, clutching the corner of the blanket he'd sewn himself. The room around them was small, dim, and worn from years of struggle, but to him it was home. And Mara, she was everything he breathed for. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, redemption, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness. Your support helps bring these emotional stories to more hearts. Ralen stood up slowly, trying to steady himself. Daytime light began warming the thin curtains as he prepared a simple breakfast, a slice of bread split between them and a half-boiled egg he hoped Mara would accept. Life had been hard since his wife passed 2 years ago, leaving him alone with a toddler and no family to lean on. He worked any job he found, carpentry one day, delivery the next, even cleaning yards and garages when everything else dried up. And despite his efforts, he was behind on rent, late on fees, and constantly racing deadlines he never seemed able to beat. But nothing terrified him more than the possibility of losing Mara. They walked together to his small motorbike, patched with tape and different shades of metal, each scratch telling a story of a fall or repair. He strapped Mara carefully in her little seat, her dark curls dancing in the morning breeze, and drove toward the workshop where he'd been promised a day's work cutting wood panels. Their path ran past an open stretch of road lined with tall daytime trees whose leaves cast soft shadows on the pavement. That was when he saw her. A woman in her early 40s, dressed in a formal cream blouse and navy trousers, stood beside a sleek silver car with the hood raised. Her black heels were dusty, her hair pulled into a tight bun that had loosened in frustration, and her phone battery seemed dead because she kept pressing it, then exhaling sharply. Something about her posture caught Ralen's eye. She wasn't angry or entitled like most wealthy individuals he'd encountered while working odd jobs. She looked exhausted, humbled by circumstance. He glanced at Mara, who was humming quietly. He didn't have time to spare, but he also couldn't leave someone stranded under the blazing daytime heat. Pulling over, he parked the bike and approached. The woman looked up in surprise, her expression a mixture of caution and relief. Ralen offered a small smile and asked if he could help. She nodded, though with a bit of hesitation, as though she wasn't sure whether to trust a man in worn clothes and dusty shoes. He dismissed the thought in his mind. Judgments were common, painfully common. He inspected the engine, his hands working skillfully. It seemed simple, a detached battery connection. He tightened it, cleaned a small section, and within minutes the car roared back to life. The woman gasped softly, her shoulders dropping in visible relief. She thanked him, her tone sincere and warm, and asked for his name. Ralen Crest, he replied, shifting slightly, suddenly aware of the dirt under his nails. "And your daughter?" she asked gently, looking at Mara with softened eyes. "Mara," he answered proudly. The woman smiled at Mara, then back at Ralen. "Thank you. You saved my morning." Ralen nodded, said he was glad to help, and prepared to leave. He didn't expect anything. He'd never helped with the intention of receiving. But as he strapped Mara in again, the woman approached and slipped a folded bill into his hand. "No, ma'am," he protested immediately, shaking his head. "I can't take that. It was just a simple fix. Please," she insisted, her voice firm but compassionate. "Accept it." Reluctantly, he did. She wished them well and drove off, leaving a small cloud of dust behind her. Ralen opened the bill and froze. It was far more than he'd expected, enough for food for a few days. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she was headed. And he definitely didn't know that she was Judge Saressa Valen, the very judge assigned to his upcoming custody hearing. Days passed, filled with hard labor, exhaustion, and the gnawing dread of that court date approaching. Ralen worked non-stop to gather every document he could: bills, school slips, receipts, letters from neighbors, and rehearsed the words he would say in front of the judge. He prayed she would see how hard he tried, how deeply he loved Mara, how unthinkable life would be without her small hand in his. On the morning of the hearing, he dressed Mara in her neatest clothes, a sky-blue dress with tiny white flowers, and wore his only decent shirt. The courthouse smelled of polished floors and quiet tension. People hurried past, their cases too urgent to notice one another. Ralen's heart pounded as he held Mara's hand tightly. They entered the courtroom. And the moment Ralen lifted his gaze to the bench, he felt the world tilt. It was her, the stranded woman from the roadside. Judge Saressa Valin. She looked just as composed as she had looked vulnerable that day, except now her hair was perfectly arranged, her posture straight, her robe perfectly pressed. Ralen felt his breath catch. Would she recognize him? Would helping her make things unfair? Or worse, would she think he was trying to manipulate their encounter? His mind swirled, fear rising like a tide. He wanted to disappear. But as the hearing began, Judge Saressa's eyes scanned the papers before her, then lifted briefly and froze. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face, soft but unmistakable. She did not react outwardly. She did not speak about it. She simply continued in her calm, measured tone, maintaining professionalism. Yet something had shifted. Ralen spoke honestly when given the chance. He didn't hide his struggles. He didn't pretend to be more than he was. He explained how he balanced multiple jobs, how he cared for Mara with every breath he owned, how he would gladly skip meals if it meant she could eat. He didn't cry, but his eyes glistened, because the fear of losing her was more painful than any poverty he'd ever known. Judge Saressa listened attentively, her gaze steady, absorbing each word, like a woman weighing more than legalities, like someone weighing hearts. She excused herself to review the documents privately. The room fell silent. Mara played quietly with her fingers while Ralen sat with trembling hands. Minutes felt like hours. When Judge Saressa returned, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. In a firm but emotional voice, she stated that Ralen Crest had shown extraordinary dedication as a father despite financial hardship, and that the court believed Mara's well-being was safest and healthiest under his full guardianship. She emphasized that poverty alone was not negligence. Love, stability, and effort mattered deeply. Ralen exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. Relief washed over him so intensely he gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. Mara wrapped her small arms around his neck. But Judge Saressa wasn't done. She looked at Ralen for a moment longer, then added that the community's support programs would be contacting him. He'd never had access to before, programs that could help him find better housing, childcare assistance, and stable work. She gave him the chance he'd been praying for but never dared to expect. Court adjourned. Outside the courtroom, Judge Saressa approached quietly. Her voice was soft, not the firm tone she used inside. You helped me without knowing who I was, she said, her eyes thoughtful. That small act of kindness told me everything I needed to know about the kind of father you are. Ralen lowered his gaze, humbled and overwhelmed. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Take care of your daughter, Mr. Crest. You've earned this. She walked away before he could form the words to thank her. Months passed, and slowly, life changed. With the help program she connected him to, Ralen secured a stable carpentry job and moved into a small but comfortable, daytime-lit apartment where Mara had her own colorful bed and a tiny bookshelf filled with donated storybooks. He began sleeping better, breathing easier, dreaming again. And though he never saw Judge Saressa again, he carried the memory of her compassion like a guiding light. One bright afternoon, as Ralen picked Mara up from school, she jumped into his arms and giggled. Daddy, my teacher said I'm very kind today. He smiled with pride. And what did you do? I gave my snack to a boy who forgot his lunch, she said simply. Because you always say real kindness doesn't wait. His heart squeezed as he hugged her tighter. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness. Your support helps keep these inspiring stories alive. Special request, comment kindness lives on if you believe a single good deed can change a life. And in that warm, hopeful daytime glow, Ralen walked home with Mara, grateful that one unexpected roadside moment had rewritten the fate of their entire world.